Okay. Hey, Texas Values friends, Jonathan Sines here, president and attorney for Texas Values. Hey, I tell you what, there's no better place for an attorney to be is in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. It's one of those important buildings and the most important places in our country. And we're here today because there's a case before the U.S. Supreme Court that deals with the issue of protecting kids. Here's the long and short of it. The Biden Department of Justice has sued the state of Tennessee to stop them from implementing their law that protects kids against gender transition surgeries, puberty blockers, sterilization, mutilation. I could go on and on. The list of danger and concern is long. But this case could impact the state of Texas if the Supreme Court doesn't get it right, because one of the big issues is the Equal Protection Clause. All right, enough of the legalese, but I want to set you up and for people to know why we're here from the state of Texas, and we have some other friends here too. We've got our Family Policy Alliance friends here. We've got Joseph Combe from Family Policy Alliance, Nick Spencer from the Family Foundation of Kentucky, where our former colleague David Walls leads the effort, and Dylan Jeremiah also from Family Policy Alliance. Joseph, I'm going to start with you. You know, our legal background, very important obviously today, but this isn't a complicated issue.
No, you're right, Jonathan. It's really not. I'm thankful to be here, and thank you that you guys are here because you have one of the laws that are at stake in this case. Family Policy Alliance wrote the original model bill called the Model Help Not Harm Bill that protects kids from these procedures. Texas passed one of them, so have 22 other states, including Tennessee and Kentucky, which are the two specific laws that are at stake here. But really what's at stake here is any state's right and obligation, their duty, to protect some of its most vulnerable citizens from these predatory procedures. These are children struggling with gender dysphoria. It doesn't get much more vulnerable than that. States have a right and a duty to do this, and the Supreme Court is going to decide whether those 23 states can do this today. That's as simple as it gets.
Yeah, no, you're right. And look, we have the state of Tennessee. They're going to be, the Solicitor General is going to be arguing the case for their state. President Trump could come into office and tell the Department of Justice, put this case aside, dismiss it, we're not doing this. But that's not from a month from now. As a matter of fact, the inauguration will be not too far from here, from where we're standing. But I want to bring in Nick Spencer, who's a pastor from the Family Foundation of Kentucky. Look, there's a lot of talk amongst the faith community about this issue because it seeks in some ways to challenge what the Bible says and what God has said, that we're made different, we're made male and female. Tell us why it's important for you to be here, Nick.
Yeah, so I serve as the Director of Policy for the Family Foundation of Kentucky. I'm also a pastor. Kentucky's law is one that is directly implicated in this case. Depending on how this case goes, Kentucky's law will be implicated just like Texas. But really, this case is about challenging created reality. Gender is a Genesis 1 issue. It's not as though it's some New Testament reality that came in later in the span of special revelation. This is right from the beginning, from when God laid the foundation of the earth. He made us in His image, male and female. And even those who are not Christians, who don't subscribe to the authority of Scripture, they should be able to recognize this too. This is not a case where the lawyers necessarily would have to go into the court and say, well, the Bible in Genesis 1 says X, Y, and Z, so that's why you should rule in favor of Tennessee. Anyone can be able to look at their body and say, I was born either a male or a female, and that's just the way it is. So this is not just a matter of faith, this is a matter of natural law, and it's a matter of reason. Any reasonable person should be able to say that Tennessee's law matters, and that these states, Kentucky, Tennessee, Texas, they all have a duty to protect the bodily integrity of individuals, especially that of children.
Yeah, well, and here's the other thing, too. I mean, there's a couple of us here. We'll have some of our family policy colleagues, Victoria Cobb from Virginia, Jonathan Keller from California, who I guess slept in because, we were up here last night checking out the scene. As we were saying last night, the calm before the storm. We walked over a little bit from the front because it is pretty loud over there. But I'm going to do some interviews later with some other people about this issue. But I want to bring in Dylan Jeremiah because, Dylan, we're at, if not already at, a tipping point where the majority of states now have some version of a law that protects kids from these gender transition surgeries. Tell us why that's been important.
It's been very important, and I think we continue to see nationwide all the polling after the election results that we've seen, that in a wide margin. People are rejecting this nonsense. And it was one thing when it was happening in the big cities, somewhere in Brooklyn or somewhere in San Francisco, but now that it's actually affecting people and they're seeing it in their suburban homes or out in rural communities, it's really taking a toll on folks, and people have rejected this far and wide in a very diverse way. I mean, we've seen it. It's become a bipartisan issue. So we see a lot of opportunities here coming in 2025.
Well, and look, I mean, with President Trump coming into office, what you could expect is after January, you're not going to have the Department of Justice intervene like they did in this case. There were 3 plaintiffs, and then I think their case, you could argue, was bolstered because the Department of Justice intervened in the case. And look, I would expect we're not going to see that when the President Trump comes into office. Look, I was on the RNC floor in Milwaukee where President Trump was giving his nomination speech, and he said, we're not going to have men compete in women's sports when I'm president. It's not the same issue here, but certainly very close and along the same lines. So we'll see what happens. And look, one of the things I hope we see is that President Trump says the Department of Justice should drop this indictment of Dr. Heim. This is a doctor from Texas who's been a whistleblower against Texas Children's Hospital because of these gender transition surgeries and some of the things they've been trying to cover up. Well, hey, listen, we're going to walk back over to the U.S. Supreme Court, see what's going on. A lot of great speech. The oral arguments are going to be starting soon. Maybe I'll get into a little bit more legal detail about the importance of this case on our social media channels here at Texas Values.